Hey everyone. In today's episode, Greg Bond sat down with Paul Bresenden, CEO of 454 Creative. Paul's a big proponent of marketers using tech to enhance their human business interactions rather than for tech to replace them. He spoke with Greg about how his team coaches clients to approach leads differently based on where they are in the funnel and how they help clients differentiate their brands so that they're competing on something more compelling than just price. It was a really great conversation. So let's jump into it.
So welcome, everybody. We are here at the B2B Marketing Expo on the Revenue Marketing Show, and I've got a couple guests here. Why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Sure. Brooks Nelson, Director of Business Development for 454 Creative.
Nice.
And I'm the president, CEO, and founder of 454 Creative.
Yeah, and you used to be a CMO, is that right?
I still work as a CMO for a couple of organizations as part of my role. Like at some point when your agency grows and you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs thinking, what is my role? Part of it is providing future value, not only to your own organization, but other organizations. And so as I step out of like day-to-day present delivery for, in our agency context, one of the things that I do is work as a CMO for other organizations and helping lead those engagements. And some of those are in conjunction with an agency relationship, some of them are not.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I bet you've got a really great perspective of both sides. Like one informs the other.
It is a
fairly
total
often.
like dance, like a very delicate dance on how to give objective feedback, especially when your other team's on the other end of the line.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's been a fun sort of learning growth experience. And that's actually one of the challenges in marketing is you have this high view of what marketing should deliver to an organization. And very rarely can an organization just jump from, going 5 miles an hour to going 100 miles an hour.
Right.
So you're really celebrating each of those wins as they ramp up their process. And part of that is understanding how a team works together, what the right structural context is, because there's never enough resource to go all the way around. So you have to celebrate like, hey, we're preaching this really high deal. In an ideal structure, you'll get 30% of the way there in the next year and a half.
Right.
It's like this, it is a weird dichotomy because when people hear you speak or they hear you like read some of your thought process on what marketing should deliver to an organization, their assumption is that you can just step in and deliver magic beans, right? And there are no magic beans. It's a lot of hard work and discipline to get you where you need to get.
Yeah, and I find fairly often, and maybe Brooks, you can talk a little bit about this as you work with new partners. I feel like typically these people are coming to you going, "Hey, I've got a big problem here. Like I've hit a growth plateau. I don't know what to do. We've tried this. Fix it and fix it fast, right?"
Yeah, everybody's always got some of that urgency in place, but a lot of times what we're helping them do is kind of figure out the baseline. A lot of people and companies come to us self-diagnosed and they think that something might be the problem, but we say, okay, well, where are the metrics to show that? And a lot of times they haven't done the work to be able to measure. So I think a lot of what we coach our clients on is setting the processes in place so that we can connect the dots. And that's why you have marketing automation systems and lead scoring and all the various attribution models so you can understand that stuff.
Yeah, I love that, and it's something that we talk about often. And I want to dive a little bit deeper into that topic. The idea of people sort of flying blind and not having the data they need. They come in with an assumption.
Yep.
But it sounds like you guys, your first step is always, well, hey, let's back up and let's capture some data. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in the sales process is most people, like Brooks is describing, come in self-diagnosed. But what they've got in their head, I think one of the most dangerous words in marketing or in sales and in the modern organization is leads, right? You tend to define something drastically different. And not only does one organization define it differently than another, the same team will have 5 different definitions for the same word, right? And so what you're looking at doing is providing quantitative, qualitative definitions on each of these stages that say, how do we move through this? And to what you're describing, I call it the unintentional lie, right? Is they have this sense in their head that like, if I just got to this over this hill, right? And I can't tell you how many engagements. If I had 15 good quality leads for each of our sales team members every month, we wouldn't be having any of these conversations. To be high fives all around. And we get to the point where we're delivering not 15, but 45 qualified leads. No, those don't count because they already know about our competitor. And so they're just wanting to get a cheaper price. I'm like, okay, let's have a great conversation over what that means. Let's unpack that for a minute. They know your product. They know the market. They have a budget for this. but you're not happy because you have no differentiation. The only thing you can compete on is price. Great, let's start there.
Let's start there.
Right.
Yeah,
That's a good, healthy conversation.
great place for us to jump off
And so
do some
a
work.
lot of this takes some like objective, non-emotional sort of perspective on what the organization is doing and where it wants to head, so that you can pinpoint those problems without this like unintentional lie disrupting every part of the process. Because it's not a lead, right? You have to rip out that sort of language. And then you, like in a healthy perspective, you standardize on industry standard terms, right? A marketing qualified lead versus a sales accepted lead or a sales qualified lead. And you put together good criteria for what each of those means. Like in an organization, what we want is the exact moment where somebody stops being one and becomes the other. Most organizations define a healthy path forward. Every organization we've worked with, not a single one of them had previously developed a path backward. When do they stop being a sales accepted lead, and when do you move them back to the marketing channel for nurturing?
Right.
And everyone gets that logically, but then when it actually comes to the implementation of the system that does it, none of that happens, right? Those individuals that you had spent all of this time cultivating, nurturing, acquiring, just live and die in that salesperson's purgatory Salesforce account or whatever it tends to be. And they're so like protectionist about it. There's no way anybody's going to touch these people but me. They're my people. And they're like, nah, they're not. Let's
And I mean, that's typically when these leads are coming in, it's 70, 80, sometimes 90% of the leads are going to sit there in that purgatory, right? Because you're only converting a certain amount of them on the way in. And so they sit there. And what you're saying is that these businesses don't typically have a process for feeding them back into the funnel at some point or re-engaging them in some way through a marketing channel.
Best case scenario, they send an email once a quarter, once a month, something like that.
Some sort of newsletter.
No sense of like process that filters through unengaged leads in terms of re-engaging leads. I mean, that's another sort of issue in the industry, right? Like we all live with the dirty lie that we think that email open rates are real or email click rates are real. And those individuals magically clicked all 34 links in an email.
Within 2 seconds of the email being sent.
And so, but like all of these tools are built even for like, you know, you add a lead in and all of a sudden you look at this algorithm that you don't have access to and they're unengaged and they're not getting emails. And the system itself is set up to be difficult and frustrating in a process that we don't get. And so we really have to come back to what does truth look like. Yes, you have tools and the tools are intended to pick those needles out of the haystack of when people are engaging. But you've really got to make sure that what you're looking at is the human connection, the human element of what actually counts. And so a lot of times, most of our clients, it's the same way. They want the automation piece to be the magic. That if this was just automated, all of our process would be solved. And what we're really trying to do is to solve human problems with technology. That rarely works. What we should be doing is enabling technology to enable human interaction, right? And how do you actually get that? How do you get a real person on the other end of it where you can speak to what they need and the problem that they need to solve it and the price point that they need to get it solved with?
Yeah, 100%. There's so much good stuff in there that you just said. I want to unpack so much of it, but the thing that sticks out in my brain right now is when you're talking about automation, I've seen this so many times, especially within our platform, right? People come in, they're excited about automation. They build a path, they set it and forget it, and they never go back and optimize it, right? They never look at the data on the back end and say, well, what worked, what didn't? Let me go back and change this and adjust that and maybe route people this way or that way, right? Like, how do you get them in your business, right? Like, that's the big part of what you're going to be doing for them over a long period of time. That's how you get that retainer base business, right? Is like, how do you get them to see that there's so much more to it than just set it and forget it automation?
I mean, you want to take a stab? You want me to
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to our work that we do with customers in the customer journey process, meaning like we wanted to find all those stages that they're possibly going to be in. And to your point, what's the attrition rule for it? Like, when are they going to go out of that stage? And then if they do go out of that stage, what sort of other paths can we map out? What's potentially going to happen to somebody? They should get a message from us that acknowledges the fact that we know them. There's nothing worse than getting that email. It's like, hey, have you heard about Salesforce? Or, you're like, yeah, of course. Like, we went through this whole process, I think that sort of process that we take people through and mapping out the steps that they go once they have left a certain stage of the funnel is really where we dive into.
There's some funny components to what you just talked about. It's like you create something, you set it, forget it, and you walk away. The first piece of advice that I would give someone that's walking into that is don't automate anything until you've done it manually for a while. Right? If you want to send email sales sequences, fine, send 100 of them manually. Go figure out if your persona targeting is correct. Go figure out if you actually get a response. The worst kind of marketing to me is stuff that you build, you deliver, you send out, and just disappears into the silence. That's really terrible marketing, right? I want an emotional response back.
That's right.
I want someone to come back and say, like, screw you, you got this wrong. Or to Brooks's point, hey, we're already a customer. Did you not know that? Right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wait a minute. We should build some exclusion lists for our current customer set. Oh, great.
Yeah.
It's better to learn those things in the one-off than it is to do it in mass and realize you've just sent this to your entire customer base.
Yes. Oh, man.
And so that sort of manual learning process is this thing that people don't want to hear.
Right.
Right? Oh, you want me to actually work for this? Yes.
Yes.
No magic beans.
Yes.
Right?
No magic beans. Back to that
Just
one.
keep repeating it,
Yeah.
right? Like, and then the other side of that, like there is some really great efficiency built into marketing automation. When you talk about how to move people path, like part of our definition for a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead, the gap between those two, to me, would be interest versus need. So marketing qualified lead, we know who they are. They have some fit criteria that say these are the right people to talk to. And so we've done some preliminary homework on that. That might be, doing some data apprention, figuring out the right job titles or persona type or whatever that sort of thing is. Can be super fancy or could be stuff that you've gathered over the years.
Right.
These are people that we've interacted with. But then the key difference between those two categories, and this is really the role of marketing, is to take people that have no interest, that aren't showing any behavioral interest, and to generate some sort of engagement. Now there's a fine line between interest and need, right? And that's what you use lead scoring for, and you use some sort of metric that says, what's the stat? 2% of web traffic is going to fill out a form. That's the only thing most people track. Do they raise their hand or not?
Right.
And then we throw most of those people away anyway, right? And so it's so easy to discount people, especially when there's a lot of waste in the system. You get a lot of spam form fills. You start losing sight that there are real people in the middle of there.
Right.
And so part of that thing is there real behavior going on? Are they engaging with the right types of content? How much content do they engage with? Have you segmented your content strategy, your website, whatever it's going to end up being, to say these people actually are showing the right kind of research and interest that's related to them buying from us.
Right.
And I mean, that goes back to like they ask you answer sort of a strategy from a content strategy perspective is, are you kind of keeping all of that information to yourself and trying to like hoard that information in the sales structure? Because no one wants to talk to a salesperson.
Right.
So if you don't put that information out there for people to consume and do their research, like Gartner has some great stats on this. People actually don't want to talk to a salesperson in the beginning. They're going to do 70% of their research before they engage with the brand.
That's right.
So if you don't give away that information, they're going to go to somebody else that does.
Right.
If you don't tell your organization exactly what the process is to walk through and start an engagement, they're going to go find it from someone else.
That's right.
And they're going to go download their process and their white paper, and they're going to go, okay, I actually know those guys and trust them. I'm going to go through that process with them. So yeah, to this like sort of how do you build that structure and how do you look at it? Brooks was saying something really, I wanted to touch back on that part of it. It's part of our playbook when we assign marketing activities is we make sure that every marketing activity, every play in that regard is tied to a specific customer journey stage. A lot of people want to make sure that like, oh, we're going to do social media and it's magically going to turn into sales leads.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, how? Right. There is a way to make that happen, but there's probably 3 or 4 other steps that you need to filter into there.
Right.
And so if you're doing social media or a particular campaign, how does that move somebody from this stage to the next stage?
Right.
And if you don't have a path to map it, don't do it.
Right.
Right. Like, and that's sort of the problem. It's like every vendor, every technology platform, we're all guilty of this. Every agency. What we tend to do is we tend to oversimplify what the process is and gloss over the big concerns. Right. And if you don't have that clear articulation, this thing is going to turn into that thing. Right. And this is how we're going to track it. And here's how we're going to measure up front. Chances are you're going to spend a bunch of money, you're going to spend a bunch of time, and you're probably not going to get to the end where it counts to revenue.
Right. Right. And I talk about the buyer's journey all the time with our team and moving someone from where they are now to just the next step. Just get them to the next step. Right.
Yeah.
And so whether that's a marketing touch point or a sales touch point is dependent on where they are in their journey. Right. And you can map it that way. But I think what it all circles back around to, and I think what I hear a lot from the customers that I talk to, and maybe this is happening with some of the customers you guys work with, is, they come in with a plan, but their plan is to buy marketing automation, right? Like it's not a plan to engage their customer base, to get them down a funnel and to measure at every step of the funnel and then optimize
'Cause
those
that's
steps of
hard,
the funnel.
right?
It's hard. It's hard. And you need somebody like a marketing agency like you guys to walk you through that, unless you're just a really savvy marketer on your own. But like, it takes work to do that.
I mean, you talk about the evolution of what marketing meant in the organization, right? The marketing person, if you rewound 10 years, was really more of a either creative or communications type, right? They led brand strategy, right? And they loosely defined what that meant. Normally, what that means in today's context is unattributable marketing, right? Like we don't really want to talk about those sorts of things when we run brand campaigns. It just means that we're going to spend a bunch of money and we don't know how it's going to work.
Right.
And now what has happened is the marketing leader is more of a technology leader, right? The current CMO in most modern, like larger organizations has a larger technology budget than the CTO or the CIO does. And it's because the world that we're stepping into is far more complex. It's far more data rich. You're in a noisier environment. You actually have to filter through lots and lots of data because if you aren't, your competitors are. And so, yes, like marketing automation becomes a critical component of it. But if you don't understand how those pieces fit together, right, you're just implementing a tool that's going to end up like one of our things is we've applied lean principles to the marketing process. And that's really our process. Like, how do we strip out waste? Right? Because I still think marketing is probably the most wasteful function in a modern organization.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so, like, waste is one aspect of it, but it has to be coupled with this idea of maximizing growth. You're always going to have waste in growing. You're always going to run experiments that don't work.
Of course, you should.
If all of your marketing efforts are working and delivering, you're not doing it right.
You're not stretching. Yeah,
right. You're
not going to go find that next channel that's going to blow up for you.
We have clients where we like the thing that we did 6 months ago is now delivering at a cost structure that's 2, 3x, 4x of what it did the previous 6 months. And if you're not continuing to evolve that structure and find better and better ways of doing it, right, you're gonna get priced out of the market. You can't boil the ocean. You can't acquire everyone. You have to really focus down on what are we trying to achieve here and how we're going to do that.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Anything to add there, Brooks? Yeah.
I think he summed it up pretty well.
Yeah. So I'd like to shift gears for a second. I mean, I think we've been talking a lot about, the problems that we're seeing and how people interact and engage. But I kind of want to shift to, your business and how do you guys approach a new client engagement and how do you, get prescriptive with them about how they can grow their business or grow, get past a growth plateau that they're facing? Like what are, step 1, 2, 3, or all right, fine. We're going to capture the data. We're going to prescribe this strategy or we're going to agree on a strategy with you. But then from a, tools, technology, process, people perspective, is there a common playbook or is it completely dependent upon the problems you're seeing with the business?
It's funny because everybody wants to think they're a unique unicorn, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's like, well, my business is different.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well, let me grab this. My business is different playbook, and
yeah.
I mean, and to some respects, like everybody's results are different, right? Everyone's approach. It's so funny the things that people think are differentiators or the self-diagnosed problem as they've done all of this work that you've got to. Part of what we do when we start is we don't allow that self-diagnosis, right? And so we start with a strategic engagement to see if they will actually let us lead. And so there's a fair amount of time where you encounter, whether it's an ego or a historical context or an unintentional lie. And we kind of said, we're the experts here, right? Like our goal is to make sure that our integrity is on the hook that say, hey, we can lead you out of this, but will you let me lead?
Right.
And so we do a fair amount of poking and prodding where we know it's going to hurt, right? Like, and if we don't know and we're not identifying, maybe we're not the right fit in that space.
Right.
But we do this often enough, and we have expertise often enough that we know where to push.
Right.
So most of our engagements, they start in a strategic engagement, what we would call a lean marketing framework, where I think most people's marketing plan is a really inefficient budgeting exercise. It's not really tied to their growth objective. They just say, hey, we want to grow 30%. And they say, yeah, give us, 12% more budget because we want to do Google ads too. And you're like, wait a minute. Great. You're spending all like hundreds of thousands of dollars on trade shows. How many leads did you get from that? We don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
That's none of your business.
It's a branding exercise.
Brand awareness.
And so part of this is start and mapping what they're already doing, right? And we want it to be honest. Like sometimes it's painful, sometimes it's awesome, right? You get to actually find out. We go through that same process of really, I think that the role that marketing plays in most organizations, or should play and doesn't play, is alignment, right? We forget that there are 4 P's to marketing. We've reduced marketing down to just promotional instead of product placement and pricing. Like, who are we reaching and where with what specific product? What's the positioning of the organization? And the more generic people get with that, right? They want their positioning to be, we've been in business since 1978. Oh, wow. That's great. So proud of you.
Awesome.
Right? Like, no one cares.
Yeah, and that actually could be a deterrent to some folks these days. Yeah.
And so part of what we're trying to do in the initial phases of it is like, hey, do we have a complete picture of where they're at and where they want to go? And so, like, we've got a specific process that walks through that. We start with the desired future state, and a lot of that is like Blair Ann's language, and we've kind of adopted a lot of that sort of methodology, and not just how we sell, but how we help the client sell, right? What does your pricing strategy look like? When we look at your competitive set, it's not just who you define as your direct competitor, but what are the viable alternatives in the market? Where else could they go? Right. How many competitors are you targeting? Right. Is it 10 or is it 200? Is it 2,000? Right. That really determines how big of an audience base we're going to go after. Right. What are the tactics that you're already employing? What's the conversion rate? We can't track it. How would we track it moving forward? Right. And so we sort of establish a common language that everybody agrees to. Right. And every time we do this, there's like a good 6 months of everybody slapping each other's hands of like, that doesn't count. Right? That's not the right language. Right. Or what do you mean by that word leads? Right. Like, and you sort of, and we'll kind of work on like, let's redefine what you're saying. Who are you saying it to? And we'll go through brand messaging and how does that process need to go through? And for like one of our ideal clients, we would start and spend the first 3 months kind of building this foundation for them strategically before we head into tactics. What we realized, especially during COVID, is no one wants to wait. Right? And so we'll say, hey, we'll actually stretch this process out over a retainer process. So it might be 3 or 6 months, depending on this goes. And we'll start doing tactics and campaigns now where we think is the most appropriate. Right. And there's going to be waste involved. That's how it always goes, right? Like, if you want execution now, we're happy to do that, but you can't skip on the strategic part.
Right. And that was going to be one of my follow-up questions here, is that I feel like, and I hear this from all of our agency partners, well, maybe not all, but a lot of them, they're saying that clients are coming to them with a transactional ask. I need leads, right? Like, always. And you could start delivering them, but you're kind of guessing without the strategic, without really understanding the 4 Ps.
And the problem with most organizations, like most agency conversations, is that everybody throws around this strategic word and it means nothing. Yeah. Right. It's like, hey, we're doing strategery this month. And you're like, what is that? Okay, great. Right. And so even with our teams, like we have our account management team. No one wants to pay for account management team. We renamed our account management team to the brand strategy team, right? And everyone is happy to pay for brand strategy, right? And it does, what we've done is done a huge investment into that team so that they are actually delivering strategy and not delivering project management or account management. These aren't like, go take them out to drinks. Like, let's have a holistic view of where their organization is heading, and you get to have the hard conversations. That's your job, right? And if your job is to build alignment in the organization. So if you sense the sales team doesn't like their leads, it's your job to go fix that. Figure out what that actually means, and if you need help, bring in me, bring in Brooks, bring in someone else, and we'll have a consulting conversation on aligning the organization. But to your point, like, when you're walking into an ideal fit relationship, it's not just you asking like what the client needs and what the client wants. We're seeing if this is a good fit on both ends. Will they let us lead? Do they have the right sort of structure? Like, are they growing organically? If they don't have an organic trajectory, what normally that means to me is that there's a fundamental marketing problem. Did you build the wrong thing? Are you selling it to the wrong people? Do you have the wrong pricing point? Right? Are you positioning yourself incorrectly? And so that's one of those sort of key flags that we teach our brand strategy team to say, like, hey, if there are these red flags that start stacking up, you need to tell that client you're going from this ideal state to like this nurture state for us because you're not executing on your end. You're not following. There's too much waste in this process, and we should fire ourselves before this gets painful. Right. And so you have that hard conversation in the middle of that saying, hey, come back to us when you're ready. Right. So we'll walk into, like, let's say it's that, right? You want engagement. You want, and even like a website project. We still try to do some sort of assessment up front of will they let us lead, right? Some sort of strategy component up front. Well, we'll charge up front for the website roadmap, you've asked us for X, but we're still going to charge you for a roadmap up front to make sure that what you scoped is going to solve your problem and that you have clear expectations of what's in scope and what's out of scope, right? Here's the V1, here's V2.
And here's the process that goes along with it too. That's a big piece, right?
We just fired a client for that sort of thing. Like, hey, we had this conversation up front. You agreed that there was a process and we're going to lead you through it. And you just went over the process and purchased a different technology from a different vendor and are thinking that we're going to be happy with it.
Right.
You don't even know if that's going to work.
Right. Well, and you're being held accountable for the results. Right.
Then you want me to go and build it.
Yeah, right.
Right. And you think at the end of it that you're going to be happy because I built it. No, you're going to be happy if it delivers.
If it works,
it's
got to work. And if not, you're going to tell everyone you know that, hey, this agency that I worked with, they're not delivering.
And so I'd rather have the honest conversation up front that says, hey, go find someone that you will actually listen to and let you be led. Because you're self-scoping all of these problems, and this isn't an easy problem to solve. If it was easy, you would have already solved it.
That's right. That's right.
Like there is work, and I'm walking into this assuming risk on the other end of it and putting my integrity on the line to say I can walk you out of this.
Right.
And if you won't let me do that, then I'm not going to put my integrity on the line. I'm going to walk away from it.
I know the path to get out of here. Can you follow me or not?
Well, and that's part of the challenge is oftentimes we don't know the exact path. Right. What I know is the process. Right. I know the specific process that says I'm going to learn this faster than you've learned it so far.
That's right.
And that's really what my job is to be this like voracious learner of other people's business models, right? How fast, and that's what I tell clients all the time in the like sales process, is you should go hire the company that understands your problem the best. And if they don't understand and articulate back to you what you're trying to solve, don't hire them. Same is true for me. And if they haven't spent the time to understand your business model, they haven't demonstrated that they've done it before, or they haven't articulated how they would have solved this, and that's a reasonable approach to you, then go find a different partner that will do that with you.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any sort of common aha moments where you see it sort of the light turns on in a client's eyes and they go, "Oh, wow, yes, that's what I was looking for."
I mean, it's funny because most of those aha moments that you see are related to magic beans, right? Like, and the way that you know that they're there is one of the easiest ways to demonstrate that you can solve their problem is to show that you've solved it in the past.
Sure.
So we don't use like formal case study stuff because no one actually reads that. But normally in our presentation deck, what we're trying to do is articulate, okay, what do you look like? What does your organization do? What's this? And then we'll walk them through, like, I'll just ad hoc bring up client accounts and say, okay, here's this client. We did this work for them. Here's where they're at. Here's where they started. Here are the results now. And it's funny even to click around in SharpSpring and go, like, here's their actual data, right? And most of our clients we have a good relationship with. We build a referral partner list. They know exactly what we're doing. We will send them a list of clients to say, hey, go reach out to Lindsay, right? And we're not going to talk to Lindsay, so give her context on this conversation. But here's her number. Tell us what you learned, right? And so we built this sort of promoter, evangelist, whatever you want to call that category list of people on our end. And we don't expect them just to blind referral to us. We're expecting them just to give an honest experience share on what they do, right? And so part of that would be like, this was really hard. The hardest part for us was generating out the content or doing whatever it's going to end up being. But we're at the end and it's glorious now. Or we're still working with them on these 4 or 5 things. Like, it gives an honest perspective that doesn't feel like you discounted what that, referral was supposed to be in the first place. Honestly, it actually throws a wrench into your sales process. Because normally when you say, go contact these 3 people, you're telling them, hey, you haven't done enough homework. Go contact these 3 people. But depending on the client, if you sense that there's enough skepticism, it can be worth a ton of gold.
Right. I mean, if they're going to make an investment and they want to make sure it's the right one.
And you're in a competitive environment. And there's 3 or 4 other agencies and you're blind to what that is. And you feel like you actually can solve that problem. Then throw that in there. If it's nailed shut, don't make it a specific part of the process because it just slows everything down. But there is some moments in that where you're like, okay, we've done this work before, and their eyes light up like, yeah, we want that. We want our sales team to not own all of their leads. The organization should own their leads because we had a sales guy walk with 1/3 of our business last year. And you're like, yep, that's what a CRM is for. That's why you invest in this process. So there's a lot of those. That's like the poking and prodding. Like, you see the organization, you go, oh, I know 12 pain points in this space.
I can see those, right?
Yeah. And they're like, yep, that's it. Thank you.
The one. Which one is more painful? Is it here? Is it here? Is it here? Yeah.
I do think that we get some aha moments when I walk people through what the process is, though. I think when you begin with, the idea that, hey, look, before we make any points, we're going to look at your competitive set. We're going to see what everyone else is doing. And then once we get a feeling for what's out there, we're then going to go and use that to inform what we need to be saying and doing. And then we're going to build this process, and then we're going to implement the process. And people are like, oh, wow, like it's got a logical element to it. And then while you're talking about it, you go through some stories and say, well, we did this, and this resulted in these wins for the client. And those are those aha moments for me, at least. Yeah.
And then, I'm trying to see, on the back end of an engagement, right? I mean, maybe it's a lifelong engagement if you're doing everything right. Like they just continue to come back over and over again. But you basically scoped out a project, said we're going to deliver this for you, and then somewhere along the lines in that process, that customer goes, "Wow, you really delivered." Right? Is there something there that I don't know is either commonly comes up or is something that like they see and they just go, wow, like, or when they go do these referrals that you're talking about, right? Like that's the thing that they're bringing up and being like, they did this, they solved this problem in this way, and I will never go back. I will always be a loyal customer. Is there any of that?
It's funny, like this is probably a good conversation for the car ride back later. The way that human brains are wired is that the pain is so acute in the moment. But the moment the pain starts to subside, you forgot that it existed altogether. And that's like a rhythm we have to teach our team. It's a rhythm we teach our clients. It's like we use sprint language so much, but what we really mean is a marathon at sprint pace. Right. And so part of it, like the whole definition of a sprint is you stop and you celebrate and you take a break and you look back to what you just accomplished. And if you don't do that, you're not sprinting, right? You didn't run fast enough. Right. And if you have a lot more left in the gas tank at the end of that engagement, you didn't scope it right.
Yeah.
So part of it for us is we have to establish the rhythm with our team and with our clients to say, here was what you set out to accomplish. And at this point, the engagement's done. Let's look at the results. Did we accomplish that? And so that's something that we were talking about with our brand strategy team is brand strategy teams should be the ones that are delivering case studies, not for ourselves or for our agency, but for the client.
Back to the client.
That's their win.
Yeah.
That's their team that did it in the conjunction. We don't want to be the hero of that story. We want them to be they're the ones that took the courage and the budget and the work to do it. Yes, we had a core component of that, but we don't need that. Right? Like I'm pretty confident in what I'm able to do. I'm probably a little bit too confident in what I'm able to do, if you ask my wife. Right? Like, and at the same time, the other end of that is we want to make sure that we're telling really great stories to the client so that they own that win. It's theirs. So I mean, we can definitely do a better job of that for sure. I think all of us see some component of that. But part of that of like starting with a small bite-sized engagement and having these regular evaluation periods, like when we design a playbook, we look at it in terms of a 3-month tactical plan. Instead of having one learning loop that's a year long where you just look at it and say, hey, we achieved the goal or we didn't achieve the goal.
Right.
You're actually looking at these small wins incrementally and reminding them, hey, 3 months ago, all of your results were from Google ads at $100 a lead. We've now set up a new campaign structure and using custom audience modeling that we've created for you, we're reaching the same audience in Facebook at $20 a lead with the same conversion rate. Isn't that amazing? You have 4x the amount of leads.
That's great. Go get me more.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And that's what they always say. Like, hey, you have an unlimited budget. I get to the point with a client in an ideal structure where there's enough health to that relationship that says, hey, we're going to check in every 60 days or whatever that is. And I want you to reevaluate the conversion rate on those leads by market. And we're going to adjust that campaign structure to go as far and deep as your team has capacity, right? I want an unlimited budget as long as it meets these conversion rates at this cost per lead threshold. And they say, yep, no problem.
Go for it.
Right? Because you've demonstrated trust over time that says, hey, you're more concerned about this than we are.
It's really good. Anything else you guys want to talk about? Any topics that are hot on your brains?
Fish concerts coming up? What do you got?
Fish concerts, July. I'll be going out to the East Coast.
Yeah, you are.
Nice.
I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot, and I think also SharpSpring's uniquely positioned to do, is coming under the idea that it's Revops. It's not sales, it's not marketing, it's Revops. And I think that's kind of an important distinction to be made because what do we say? Everyone's in sales, right?
Daniel Pink says
Daniel
that.
Pink says that, yeah.
I always repeat it's one team, one goal, right? Yeah. Like there's no, I don't get to count it as a win if it doesn't count to revenue.
That's right. I love that. I mean, that's one of my big pet peeves, things that I hang on all the time. And I love that you brought up the revenue ops thing, because I think it's a newer concept, but unifying your funnel top to bottom,
Yeah.
understanding like you, if you end up with a silo of, you have marketing ops people and you have sales ops people and you have customer success people and they're all doing operations separately, you end up with these silos where you're throwing stuff over the fence, over this wall of confusion, and somebody else is catching it going, well, I don't know what to do with this, right? And so you got to unite that. And I think that is one of the things that when we talk about SharpSpring, like I hit on that one all the time. And so I'm curious from, since you brought it up here, what's the perspective from an agency? Like, how can you leverage that revenue ops sort of functionality in SharpSpring to really deliver for your clients?
Well, I think that gets into the area that we focus on a lot more than some of our peers do, which is that dance between sales and marketing. Because as somebody's moving through their customer journey, the buyer's journey, there's things that both sales and marketing need to do to facilitate the relationship going further. And marketing can do some things that make it easier for somebody to make a decision or trust the sales guy. I mean, we talk about it all the time with brand messaging, making consistent value propositions and consistent language. Not only does Google reward you for having the same thing in the ad as it is on the website, but when you talk to somebody, if I say the same thing that Paul says, and it's the same thing that the brand strategist says, then there's a level of confidence that's inherently instilled in the customer. So I think, using a platform like SharpSpring that allows us to map out how that conversation goes, the tasks that go along the way, and all the tactics that we're employing, that's really where I think we shine.
And Paul, you mentioned this earlier. I think it helps a lot with that. If you have those silos and you don't have a revenue operations focus on your business, marketing hands stuff to sales, who hands stuff to the post-sale team for delivery. But if you don't have it unified, they very rarely hand it back. Like, so if that person needs to be marketed to a little bit more, that's where it just goes off into the trash bin somewhere, and somebody will find it 2 years later and be like, whatever happened to this lead?
You'd be surprised at like the horror stories that exist that you see in organizations, right? Like, I was in one organization that I stepped to in a CMO role. And what I didn't realize is that the owners, who were came up out of sales, decided that the most appropriate thing was that if the lead was generated from marketing, that the salesperson would get a lower commission structure. And that filtered into the marketing team having this like protectionist attitude over, if we touched it, we get some credit for it. And the sales team saying, there's no way in hell you're touching my people. So what we realized is, it took me a year to figure this out, but the sales team had all of their particular client relationships on Excel spreadsheets and refused to put them in the CRM. And we're managing them like, oh no, I cold generated this. There's no way I'm letting the marketing team touch it. It's like, we don't realize that our organizational structure, like their favorite, well, I won't go into too many details, right? Compensation does drive behavior. It's just normally the wrong way.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that we don't want to admit from our perspective, is we think that we're building a system that like bridges these sorts of things. But when we do this compensation model that intentionally separates out our collaborative effort, then don't be surprised that there is no collaboration. And so part of that role, like a SharpSpring piece would do, is for me to step in, is I want to make sure that everybody wins and everything counts. We want to celebrate when the salesperson closes a lead, and I have the visibility on that. We'll immediately go into their Slack channel and create a wins channel, and we'll celebrate when big deals close, regardless if we had anything to do with them or not. Yeah. We always give somebody else the high five for that credit, even if we had a significant role to play in that, because it doesn't change anything for me. Right. That's the fun thing about not like walking into a relationship like this where you're oriented to the organization's growth, is it's not about ego for us, right? It's really about achieving something meaningful for that company. And we all get to celebrate that. So there's one team, one goal, right?
Yeah.
We crushed it. We built the sales goal. This month is because of marketing. Next month is because sales team had a great sort of effort, or the lead gen team over in the Philippines did this really great job of bringing in an ideal client. And you sort of start to create some magic and collaboration, share some learning that you realize, hey, we want to do an NPS process at the conclusion of every sales demo. Is that a sales process or a marketing process? Why? Because we want to know if the salesperson missed something critical. Yeah. We want to set up, like, don't just drop all of your like nurturing introduction workflows because they jump straight from the website into being like a sales lead. Well, they still need to know how you're differentiated, right?
Yep.
You can't have this idea. This is one of the new things that I'm playing with, and I haven't figured out all the right language, but in an ideal Revops structure, there's no handoffs,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
No handoffs. And the sales team can't say, this one's mine now, don't talk to them. And the marketing team doesn't want to hand them over and throw them over the fence because there is no handoff.
Yeah.
It's the idea of all of us working in tandem together to get to that
We
outcome.
walk alongside each other to the finish line, and that finish line. And I think it's worth pointing out that North Star metric, that one team, one goal, is revenue, right? It's revenue and it's revenue growth. And if you can set that as your one team, one goal,
it's even further than that, right? Because you have to look at revenue not as the initial sale, but the lifetime customer value of
LTV,
that, right?
Yep.
And if you move beyond that idea of like, hey, I'm going to start in a small bite-sized chunk, right? I'm going to start in a small engagement because it's easier to build trust and demonstrate expertise in the small engagement. But I know that once I'm done, there's these 10 other things sitting behind it, right? Changes your whole perspective on what you're doing.
Yeah. Get somebody in the door and then grow them, right? I mean, it's infinitely less expensive to market to somebody who is already a customer.
Yeah, for sure.
If you do it, most people don't.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm such a like system design and system builder. Like I really enjoy that kind of stuff. And so when we start talking about the Revops and system design and like inputs, outputs, feedback loops, and making sure that everything in the system is optimized to deliver the result that you're looking for.
And
Like
there's
somebody said this to me. It was like every system is designed to deliver the results it delivers.
I love that.
Right. And so
totally.
like if you're having a problem with your revenue system, it was designed that way.
Right. And that's the funny thing about this is A, no one wants to hear that, but it's absolutely true. And two, like we geek out and nerd out over this sort of stuff. But if I actually give the full idea of where they should be, most people gloss over and go, you have no context of like, I can't even picture me getting there. And so what we're really doing is just giving them a digestible bite-sized chunk at a time. There's probably a top level conversation with the owner or key executive that says, hey, like, here's your 3-year objectives, right? Usually they're coming back to us with a 3-year objective, but they don't know how to get there. And so this transition from whatever that is, we're going to move from a purely inbound structure and marketing is going to lead gen for us to getting to an ABM structure where there are no handoffs. Like they don't like these are all like you might as well be speaking, Greek. It doesn't matter. They don't get it.
Right.
So part of this is how do I guide you through in this process? And like a year from now, the structure may completely change and I'll have to adjust even what I have in my head. But they see this one horizon. If I just get over this horizon, we're going to be gold. We're going to just crush the competition. I'm like, no, I've been over 3 further hills than that. And my hill's a little bit further and I still don't see over that one, but I can at least get you to the next 4 or 5 hills. And then we're going to have to reevaluate and see where we're at again. But it's like always seeing over that next horizon and kind of leading that client engagement on what you've been able to see.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, one more topic. I know we're going long here, but like
we're here.
This has been a fantastic conversation. So I want to continue it as much as possible if you guys don't mind.
Yeah, not at all.
Just the one last topic is, looking into the future, right? Like looking at what's coming up the rest of this year into next year. Are there any, key marketing, topics or tools or ways to look at the world or drive demand or, are any of those things kind of, big? What do you see coming that's going to really change the way marketing works? I don't know. Maybe it's nothing.
I don't know. I think, the first thing that comes to mind is just the personalization and really making sure that things are human first.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. I mean, we talked about this idea that like don't automate it until you've actually done it. And I think, every system is trying to fake this personalization. Like, oh, like you came to the website, you looked at this. Now we're going to give you more of this. And that's good to an extent, but we can't forget like the real fact is that there's actual humans on the end of this, and you need to be thinking about it from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, so there's so many like points to consider with that. I think that like refocus back to fundamentals, like people buy, right? Technology doesn't buy, the algorithm doesn't buy, Facebook.
So it's kind of a
Most people
customer
don't.
experience focus in a way. Like,
And even that has so many buzzwords associated, right? Like you're going to get to this CXC role and all this other stuff that goes along with it. And what we're doing is we're trying to make ourselves sound smarter than we really are, right? And at the end of the day, what it ends up doing is making us go through long, lengthy sort of transformational projects that don't deliver on what they promised, right? So I think part of this is we need to recognize that our world is getting more and more complex. And we're being sold more and more of a lie down the road because there's now 15 people that want to interject themselves into the chain of being this essential component. So there's probably a few like fundamental principles that I would try to push clients back to, right? Like your goal is to build a system that delivers the growth that you're looking for. And then smaller is probably better than bigger. If you don't understand how that works, don't do it, right? If you don't know how to play the game, don't play the game, because it gets more and more complex and they're skewing the data set to something further and further to what counts to you, which is revenue in your pocket. So if you don't get it, don't do it, but hire someone potentially that does, and measure the results not by execution, but by outcome, right? So that's sort of like this simple, like, business owner advice. But from like the agency side, in terms of what we're looking at, it is fascinating to see this like level of gap between what people are interacting with in the experience, especially in the ad experience, and how noisy that environment is getting, and how the different platforms are changing all of the data sets to mean something drastically different. It's not even a conversion anymore that we get credit for. We're going to add in view-through conversions, and we're going to add like our revenue modeling is going to include conversions of someone that may have seen an ad because they have an account, but they didn't actually it's too much, right? And so what we're doing is we're getting to this point where we're trying to make data count in ways that data shouldn't count. And so, like, I mean, I've seen this data privacy fight between Facebook and Apple, this data privacy fight in Apple and email clients. Like, this does become more and more of a technical game, and the like learning loops on the agency side have like become faster and faster and faster. Whereas most organizations would hire one agency and they would, like one of our clients, I would handle all of marketing for English-speaking countries. We've now started splitting out localization and hiring agencies in other English-speaking markets because I need someone just to focus on that market and that market alone. And the learning that we get, we apply in different markets. We're starting to see exponential growth happening because there's learning that's happening at a faster rate, not a slower rate. So, there is this sort of challenge where if you don't spend money on the technology and you don't have an expert practitioner that's guiding you through it, there's a chance that your client is going to do that, or your competitor is going to do that. And then they're going to have an exponential cost advantage and growing over you. It's no longer just how much you spend or if you have the tool set up correctly, right? It's how do you expertly utilize the tool. Right. I had this conversation yesterday in the sales pitch, and their conversation is like, should we use LinkedIn? And I'm like, you're already using LinkedIn. Do you think that what I'm telling you is that if I magically tell you to use Snapchat ads, it's going to solve your problem? Yeah. It's not. Yeah. And the magic that's going to happen if we look at success a year from now is your advertising landscape, your technology landscape. It may not look too different. In fact, it may not look different at all. But what will have changed is the fundamental positioning and like placement of your ads to the right people that yield an emotional response where they convert. And it's not that LinkedIn solved that problem for us. Right. It's that we had to build the right business model and the right messaging and the right audience modeling to get in front of those people in the right way. And the nuance to that just constantly shifts, right? The platform changed their algorithm. Your audience model reached saturation. You didn't realize it. Like, it takes someone to look at that and go, oh, we need to adjust.
Paul, Brooks, this has been an amazing conversation. Thank you guys so much for coming on here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And,
thanks for having us.
Yeah. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks.